ghosts? Have they become a cliche? Or can we once again examine this phenomena seriously? After all, isn't it really our own afterlife we're curious about? Let's delve a little deeper on Jim Harold's Ghost Insight. Welcome to the program, and I think we have a fascinating show for you today. We have a return guest, but we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Our guest today is Cliff Gary. Now, he has written numerous books, and we've talked to him a lot about his work as a certified hypnotist. Now, not only has he helped over 100 clients to stop smoking, eating more healthily, managing stress, anxiety, depression, and more through his practice at Mind Balance Hypnosis, but he added past life regression to his services, and we've had some great conversations on that. After he started working in past life regressions, he wrote a book, Journey Back, detailing the regressions directed of 27 volunteers who went into regressions to discover their past. So those were some great conversations we had on past life regression. But today we're going to talk about after-death visitations, specifically his new book or his recent book, Encounters with the Other Side, My Experiences with After-Death Visitations. And we're glad to welcome Cliff back on the program. Hi, Cliff. How are you doing today?
Fine. Thank you for having me back.
Good to have you. I appreciate it. Now, certainly past life regression, that is a very rich area of exploration, and you have done a lot of work in that area, obviously. But after-death visitations, while certainly I guess they're kind of cousins because we're talking about the afterlife, one doesn't necessarily map to the other. How did you decide to write a book on after-death visitation?
I actually had somebody tell me you should write these stories down. And that's how I wrote the book. That's really how it came about. I had so many stories and I started telling all the people, different people, all the experiences that I'd had since I was a child and everything. And that's how the book came about.
So in some ways, a lot of these experiences maybe came before you really got into past life regression. Is that correct?
Oh, definitely. I only got into past life regression about maybe 2 years ago.
Now, do you think that it seems like to me you may be a sensitive? I mean, not only do you have this expertise in hypnotism and so forth and working with past life regression, but it sounds like you're probably a sensitive in addition to that.
I guess so, because when I look at the stories, and I actually reread the book because I thought, oh, this is interesting. I haven't read it for a while. And I thought about it and I went, I wonder how many other people have these kind of experiences. But the interesting thing was when the book came out, suddenly people started talking about their own experiences. And people have a lot more experiences than what they let on.
And I think sometimes, and you tell me if I'm wrong, people discount their own experiences. They kind of think, oh, that's just a coincidence. Maybe if it's a dream, oh, that was just, wishful thinking. And I think people expect things that are even more dramatic than some of these stories. They expect, grandma to show up in full body apparition, which you may have some cases like that. But people sometimes belittle their own stories. Do you think that's accurate?
I do. And also I think that they're afraid of it. They put it to the side because it just can't be real. My father had his mother come back after she passed away, and he was petrified. He was scared. I told him later, I said, that was your mother. Would she ever hurt you? No. Well, but he didn't expect that to happen. So he thought it was a nightmare.
Now, after-death communication, and we talked to people like PMH Atwater about this topic, fascinating topic, takes a lot of different forms. What are some of the different forms that after-death communication can take? Is it just like we saw in Scrooge, the idea that Jacob Marley's just going to show up, or maybe what happened to your father, the apparition just shows up? Or are there a lot of different types of after-death communication?
There's a lot of different types, because I've had them just show up, like standing next to my bed. I have stories in here about 2 people that I knew who passed away who were hitchhiking in Topanga Canyon. I don't know. There's just a whole lot of different avenues. And ever since I was a kid, I've never been able to sleep totally very well. I actually sleep with the nightlight on now, and I'm 63 years old because I don't know who's going to walk into my room. And there's nothing worse than having a complete dark room and knowing somebody's standing over you.
Yeah, that's true. Even if it's someone you love, speaking to your father's story. Now,
I like the surprise.
I'm going to share a story of mine. I've shared this. This happened last November, so it's almost been a year now. But I've shared it numerous times, so repeat listeners are probably going to get sick of hearing it. But anytime I talk to somebody about after-death communications, I share this because I think it shows kind of the weirdness in kind of the, quote, coincidental or synchronistic things that can happen with ADCs. I grew up with my uncle who lived with me and my mom and my brother. So he lived with us my whole life. So in my growing up years, so it was kind of like my two dads. I had my father, who thankfully is still with us, and my uncle. And my uncle was like a second dad to me, very much. And he passed in 2013. So anyway, last November, I was on a paranormal cruise with Rosemary Ellen Guiley and Micah Hanks, and we were having a great time. And when we had a day at sea, people, this was a paranormal themed cruise, supernatural themed cruise. So people would come to see lectures that we would do for the group. And it was very enjoyable. And the only downside to the whole trip is I had a little bit of a sore throat. So on one of the breaks, while we were doing these talks, the conference room was right next to the casino in the ship. So I said, I'm going to go get some coffee to kind of soothe my throat a little bit on one of these breaks. And I walked out of the conference room, and I'm basically on the floor of the casino. Very smart by the cruise people. They want to get the business people walking through the casino so they'll leave some of their money. And I saw one of our cruisers who had paid to attend playing one of these crane games. It has the claw that comes down, and in this case, you pick up money. And I don't think the odds are very good of getting any money, maybe losing some. But I thought to myself, man, I wish my uncle were here. Now, he passed in 2013, and the one thing that he loved, it was the weirdest thing, he loved these crane machines in stores. You go to a Walmart or a CVS or something like that, you come out, there's this crane machine, and you might drop $5 or $10 trying to win a 99-cent toy just for the sport of it. Whatever. He loved that. He said, boy, I wish he were here. He would love that. He would just love playing that game. And Cliff, it wasn't 10 seconds after I had that thought. And it was a very specific thought. It wasn't passing. It was genuine, almost sadness that he couldn't be there to play that game. A woman walks up next to this guy, and she kind of cups her hand to her mouth, and she says, John, calling out, I assume, to her husband. Guess what my uncle's name was? My uncle's name was John. And yes, could it have been just a coincidence? Yes. But boy, that's one heck of a coincidence. I happen to believe it was my uncle on the other side saying, A, thanks for thinking of me. B, I'm still around. Don't think I'm gone. And I also think it might mean I love you. And that was very powerful to me. And every time I tell it, I get kind of a lump in my throat. What do you think, Cliff?
Oh, I have similar experiences like that too. It's kind of like they're trying to get the message across to you. They use a lot of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's almost like chess pieces. Like I had to be at that specific place at that specific time. The guy had to be in the casino at that specific time playing that specific game. I had to have that specific thought, and that specific woman would have to be in that place calling out specifically for her husband who, is over probably playing a slot machine. So, I mean, a lot of things had to happen for that to work out. Had my talk been 30 seconds longer or 30 seconds shorter, I wouldn't have been there. So to think about the different variables, they really must have a way of kind of arranging things. where they can make things happen, or at least ask somebody to arrange things to make things happen. Now, tell us one of those kind of stories where it's not maybe the typical after-death experience, but certainly one that's convincing.
I used to work in downtown Los Angeles at a law firm, and the library was just down the street from me. And I used to, take books out of the library and everything. And I had to return this one book. And I thought, okay, I'm going to head to the library. And I started to leave. And then suddenly I felt this feeling that I shouldn't go. So I turned around and went back. The library caught on fire.
Oh, my.
Just at that time. And I would have been, probably in the library if I would have kept on walking. So that's one story of I could have been someplace and somebody stopped me. Another one that I always like to tell is that driving to go to work, I lived in another valley called the San Gabriel Valley, and I had to drive into downtown Los Angeles. But I took a bus every day, and the bus actually took me through the special lane down the highway and everything. And I always sat in the very back seat, and it was because the seat felt better on my back. And I always sat next to the right-hand window. And one day, at the very last moment, I decided, you know what, maybe I shouldn't go to work today. The next day that I showed up, I sat down in my seat and everything. And the guy that was riding the bus says, that was really lucky that you weren't here yesterday because a bullet went right through that same window.
Oh, my gosh.
Always said.
Oh, well, I've one that's very similar to that. And I didn't take it as an after-death communication, but someone certainly guided me not to be there. This goes back to when I was a young man, and a very young man, and my wife, who wasn't even my fiance at the time, we had been dating, maybe 3-4 months, something like that. This is 1994. And anyway, we had gone to, I live in northeastern Ohio, and we're very close, within an hour and 15 minutes of a place called Cedar Point, which is widely considered to be the best roller coaster amusement park maybe in the world. And anyway, we went there with some friends. I was working and just started in radio, so I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but I got some free tickets, so we went. And anyway, we were driving back home, and at that particular time, she lived maybe about 35-40 minutes from me. She lived in a suburb. I lived in the city in a little, well, it was a changing neighborhood. It had been an ethnic neighborhood, and it had started to go downhill, but it wasn't quite downhill yet. It's decidedly gone downhill in years after with a lot of crime and so forth. But anyway, I dropped her off, and she said, you must come inside and sleep on the couch. I'll ask my dad. He was very traditional Italian, had emigrated over here in the 60s. And so he wouldn't exactly be lax on things. But I finally acquiesced, and I thought, okay, maybe I should listen to her. And she went and asked, and I slept on the couch. Got up in the morning, had a nice breakfast, and kind of when I knew it's like, this seems like family. I think this is gonna work out, and it did. 20 some years later, we're still married. But anyway, I thought, I was happy on the way back home and everything, and I pull up in front of my house where I lived in the suburb, in the inner city. And I honestly, just earlier that week, I'd signed a lease to move because I had a funny feeling about the place. Anyway, I see the person who lives in the back, who is the landlord's son. I had the front half of the house. He had the back half. It's one of those old style A-frame houses, probably built around the turn of the last century. And I see him across the street pointing towards our house on the other side of the street. And I pull up and park in front of the house. I get out and I walk over to him like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? I was in a good mood. Like, we got to talk. And he pulls me over to the side. He's like, there's been a drive-by. I'm like, there's been a drive-by shooting. Where? Whose house? He said, our house. And what had happened is that about, I guess, 3:00 in the morning, somebody had loaded several rounds of an armor-piercing AK-47. I kid you not, and I have a piece of shrapnel to prove it, into our house. Now, it was all on the lower floor. The bedroom was in the upper floor, so hopefully I would have been upstairs, but who knows? And I had one of those old double door refrigerators, took a direct hit. The bullet passed right through it like it was butter and through a ketchup bottle. Also, I had a microwave that was new. It was my first microwave and it didn't last very long. It took a direct hit. And he lived downstairs. So he said bullets were literally whizzing over his head. And what had happened was, and I don't mean to be too long about this, but just to give the full story, there were two houses that were both blue. Ours was dark blue. The one next to us was light blue. And apparently, I think a bunch of unsupervised teenagers lived next door. That's part of the reason I was nervous about the place. And they had crossed a motorcycle gang. The motorcycle gang didn't take too kindly to it, so they were going to give them a little special delivery, but they got the wrong address. Now, my goodness, what would have happened had I stayed there, or what would have happened had you gone to work that day? Similar stories.
I really believe that somebody somewhere looks over us.
I agree.
At the very last moment, don't do that. Don't go there.
Yep, that's true.
I have one more story.
Oh, yes, please do.
I was, this was back in 1978, and I was driving with my girlfriend at that time, and she was actually driving her car, and we were in a left turn lane. We were waiting for the signal to change, and as soon as the arrow appeared, she started moving forward, and I looked down at the floor, and there was this black rubber thing sitting on the floor, and I reached down, I picked it up, and I said, "What's this?" And she looked over and stopped the car. And just then, this guy was driving through the intersection like 60, 70 miles an hour, being chased by 5 police cars. And if we had followed through with that left turn, we would have been hit on my side of the car. And who knows, we probably would be very injured or dead, one of the two. And just simply because of this black rubber thing on the floor that I just happened to notice at that time stopped us from being hit by those cars.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's, those close calls are certainly, it makes you think after you have them, you kind of swallow hard and say, oh boy,
I used to kid with my friends. I'd say, don't worry about anything. You're with me. I always get pulled out just at the right time.
Now, do you have some stories that are maybe more kind of traditionally what we think about as after-death communication?
Oh, definitely. A lot of this started when I was about 8 years old. I used to be in this one room. I'd have these white ghosts float through my room, and they would just float on through. They wouldn't even notice me, but it was like they were just floating. I always call it like Penn Station, all these ghosts just floating through my bedroom. I spent a lot of time probably laying under my covers because it happened almost every night. And finally, when I was about 12 years old, my grandmother had just passed away, and I was pretty close with my grandmother. And one night she appeared at my doorway, and I just looked at her, and I wasn't scared of her at all. And I could feel her love just radiating at me. And it was like we were having this communication without saying anything. And that was the first time I ever saw anybody come back and appear to me. And it was a very loving experience.
Have you ever had any frightening after-death communication?
Well, I had one in particular, and I can't really explain this. I had a German Shepherd dog at the time. I was only probably about maybe 18, 19 years old. And we had gone to bed. I had gone to bed. It was like 12:30 in the morning. And I was getting ready to, jump in my bed and go to sleep and everything. And suddenly I froze. I felt this dark, evil feeling coming down the hallway towards my bedroom. And you know how animals are. They just kind of freeze also when they sense something. And so, I was already kind of scared, feeling this whatever it was coming down the hallway. But as soon as I looked over and saw my big German Shepherd dog frozen and staring at the doorway and everything, that had actually intensified my fear. And it just kept coming and coming. And I felt like whatever this thing is going to kill me. It was so, terrifying and everything. Just before it hit my bedroom, it disappeared.
Huh.
I have no idea to this day what that was.
Now, I'm looking at the table of contents here. You said you had a story surrounding the Kennedy assassination.
That was a pretty amazing, that was a dream. And I don't totally have an explanation of why some of these happen. Every single story is totally true. And I experienced it. And one night I was having this dream and it was like a play. And I knew it was a play, and everybody that was in the dream knew it was a play. And we were acting out the Kennedy assassination.
So this was after the assassination?
Oh, of course. This was in like 1979 or something like that. And I am playing John Kennedy, and we're heading into Dallas and all this stuff. And I'm in this room and there's these people coming and they're talking to me about things that we needed to do. And then this guy goes, okay, you ready? Let's go to Dallas. And I go, okay. We get in the car that he was in and I'm sitting in the back seat and all this stuff. And we're driving through Dallas and everything. And this guy's explaining to me what's kind of going on and everything. And it gets to just the point, just before he's assassinated. And this guy turns to me and goes, so do you want to go through with this or not? And I went, okay, let's go through with it. We went through the rest of the dream. I could see the assassination and everything. And the interesting thing about it was I could feel the bullets coming from the back, but I also felt them coming from the grassy knoll.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's because I've always believed that, I think somebody could have been on the grassy knoll or whatever. But in the dream, I actually saw the bullet like coming slow motion from the grassy knoll. And then I woke up and I went, wow, what a strange dream. The next night, after I went back to sleep, these people came back again and they go, so how was that? Was that okay? And everything. And then they started explaining to me that a lot of people have this dream and they play this whole scenario out. I have no idea why, but it was the strangest experience to have somebody walking me through this and knowing that it was just a play.
That is really strange. And if it's a play, that kind of suggests that there may have been a bit of stagecraft, maybe some deception. See what I'm saying?
Actually, in the dream, these two guys come into the hotel room that we're at, and actually somebody was paying somebody off.
Oh my. Wow. That's why.
Yep.
Wow. And I'm with you. I think there was a lot more to it than we were led to believe. Now in the book here, I also see you apparently see extra guests at funerals.
Yeah, I always laugh. I always laugh about that. Not that funerals are funny or anything like this, but at funerals, even the family of the deceased, they'll turn to me and go, where are they? Where are they standing? And I go, they're standing over there. And the thing about it is I didn't go about to go, well, I'm going to learn how to do this or anything. It just kind of happened. One time I remember I was at a funeral and I saw the deceased standing over there to the side with somebody else. And this other person was probably their guide and was explaining what was going on. And, the guy was talking about all the people that had come and everything. And I looked over and suddenly the deceased turned to the other guy and goes, oh my gosh, he can see us. And it was like, I can see you. So every time I go to a funeral now, people will always ask me that question. Where are they? Where are they standing? Interesting.
That's got to be quite a feeling, and to know that if you go into a funeral that you're going to see these extra guests, that's something else. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about kind of ties into your other work with past life regression. You have a section in this book where you talk about past lives and past life memories, I assume. Talk to us about a couple of those, because This is one of those things that I always wonder about, because I think most of us have certain inclinations or certain things we're interested in, time periods of, some people, for example, my wife says my late mother-in-law was very interested in Asian culture. So she wonders if maybe she had been Asian in a past life. I've always been interested in 20th century political history. So I wonder, well, was either I alive in the early, the mid, because I was born in 1969. Was I alive before that? It seems like that era really resonates with me, the earlier 20th century before I was born, or particular kinds of music or things that just for some reason, it really fascinates me. And I think everybody has it. There's certain things that just kind of speak to you in history. And I always wonder if that's because of a past life. Well, talk to us a little bit about some of your past lives and your past life memories that you made a part of this book.
Well, I also want to say that what I've discovered also is that we have these feelings. I like certain kind of music, or I like certain kind of history. And it used to really amaze me. Well, why am I feeling this? But now I've understood that we bleed through. Past that we were, whoever it was, the time period and everything still bleeds through to us, because we're actually more aware than what we think we are of all of the experiences that we've had through many, many lives. So when you say you like certain kind of history or certain kind of music, that's probably very true, because I'm sure that you're bleeding through and in touch with who you were in the past. A lot of these past life experiences happened when I was dreaming. There's a part in my book where I talk about how I started having dreams with this group of people. And I call them because I couldn't figure out what to call them and everything. And I thought, well, this is really odd and everything. Actually, I've read recently where other people start talking about having dreams with groups of people that guide you. And I had this one dream where they said, okay, now well, this is what we want you to do. We want you to go to the library and we want you to look up a certain name. And the name was Charles Wilson Peale. I had never heard of this guy ever. And I went, okay, I'll do that. So when I'd woke up in the morning, I wrote down the name. So I went to the library, and this is before they had computers. So you had to go through index cards.
Yeah, I remember those. It was. I remember my first quarter in college. They did not have computers to look up things. Yikes! I had to actually use card catalog. So I still remember that.
The listeners out there that are in their 20s or whatever, go look them up online and see what they look like. But anyway. So I was going through the card catalogs, and I was going, this name does this. This is crazy. So I'm going through, and suddenly I go, oh my God, this name does exist. And I pulled out every single book out of the library and brought it home. And I started reading about this person. And I was going, this sounds familiar. And I'm going through it, reading everything. The next night I have a dream, and they come back and they go, that was you in a past life. Well, he ends up being a painter. He was born in Maryland, and he moved to Philadelphia. And he actually knew George Washington and a lot of other famous people. And you can actually go to museums and actually see his pictures. And that's a very strange feeling. When I go through the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston, and I run across this picture, I look at it very closely and I go, does that mean I painted that? And I'm looking at every single line and everything. And if you've ever been to Philadelphia, they have the Liberty
Bell?
Liberty Hall or whatever.
Yeah, I know exactly where it's at, yeah.
So I was touring through that, and I went upstairs and I said, I have feelings about this room and everything. Come to find out, he had a museum that was set up in that top floor. Huh. And it was the most amazing thing. And it was kind of like, I don't want to throw around people's names and going, oh yeah, he thinks, he's so-and-so or whatever like this. But I thought, this is safe because he's not as well known as other people and everything. That's how I came about to discover that past. it was quite amazing. I was also sent by these people to do, other little things. Like they sent me to a bookstore one time and they said, okay, we want you to go find this one book. And so I went and looked around and everything, and I didn't know what book it was. And suddenly it just popped out at me. And I don't know if you ever read Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts.
I'm familiar with it, but no, I have not. But we interviewed somebody on that book. So yes, I'm familiar.
So I brought it home and it was like, oh my gosh, this is eye-opening, fascinating books. But anyway, they told me to go to the bookstore and get this book. And I've had the original copy ever since. And actually the binding has fallen apart and everything like this.
Now, one other thing I did want to mention. Now, some people feel that the idea of ghosts and reincarnation are kind of mutually exclusive. I mean, if people are constantly reincarnated, even if there's a waiting time or something, some feel, well, that doesn't make as much sense with the idea of ghosts. So it's got to be either or. But how does reincarnation play into this idea of after-death communication? And how, in your view, are they both possible and compatible?
Well, yeah, they're not either or. They're actually interactive with each other. Because what I've discovered is that your personality and who you are continues to exist before you're born and after you die. And even while you're alive, there's still these other personalities of you that still exist. As a higher self, there's all your past life, people that you were at one point interacting with you. And like when you go into dreams at night, people have some very active dreams and they're talking to people and, you wake up and you go, who was that I was talking to? That's just another part of your reality of who you are. Then when you choose to come back, you come back and you have another life. But there's also a part of your personality that maybe lingers around, and that could be partially what they call ghosts, but also there's relatives, there's friends that show up and everything. And it's not like they're ghosts like in the movies. It's almost like a visitation. It's almost like if somebody was to knock on your door and let's sit down and let's have coffee. It's kind of like that in some ways, And so you're having this conversation with these people. So I really I don't see ghosts the same way as I used to see them. I see them as people that, want to interact with you and probably people you know.
Very, very interesting indeed. The book is Encounters with the Other Side, My Experiences with After-Death Visitations. The author is Cliff Aguirre. Now, Cliff, I know you have this book. You also have Journey Back, which I mentioned, and The Death Transition, which I did not mention. Where can people get this latest book and all of your other books?
Well, all of my books are on Amazon, but they can also go to cliffbooksmusic.com, and that will direct them to my website. And by going to my website, you'll learn a lot more about me, my hypnosis, and all this other stuff. But if you click on the tab about books and music, you'll find all my books there that have a link to Amazon. You actually interviewed me for The Death Transition back in 2012.
Yes. We've done 3. This is our 3rd interview together, and I hope that there'll be more books forthcoming and we could talk about more experiences, whether they're after-death visitations or past life regressions, or maybe there's other experiences out there. Cliff, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great discussion talking about after-death visitation. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Ghost Insight. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. There's certainly, I believe, communication with the other side, signs from the other side, protection from the other side. So glad we got to talk about it a little bit today. We'll talk to you next time on Ghost Insight. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.